we have an object that presents very advanced technology. It's no human technology. There is no question in my mind.
Deep in a South African mine, tucked inside rock that's been around since the Earth was a baby, miners found something that shouldn't exist. It's a small, metallic-looking sphere, perfectly balanced and etched with 3 clean grooves around its middle. Finding a manufactured object in a 3-billion-year-old layer of stone isn't just a weird discovery. It's a glitch in the history of our planet. Is it an ancient alien relic, or has nature been playing a very long, very disturbing trick on us? The impossible geometry. The most disturbing thing about the Buga sphere isn't that it exists. It's that it looks exactly like something a human would make in a high-tech machine shop. When miners first pulled these out of the Wonderstone silver mine in South Africa, they weren't looking for ancient mysteries, they were just digging through pyrophyllite. But then, these small, flattened globes started rolling out of the rock face. Some are a deep, bruised blue, others a dull, metallic grey, but they all share a feature that makes your skin crawl if you believe in linear history. 3 perfectly parallel grooves etched right around their equators. In any other context, you'd call it a pulley, a bearing, or a part of a 20th century engine, but these were encased in solid stone dating back 3 billion years. At that point in Earth's timeline, the most advanced life on the planet was essentially pond scum. There were no hands to craft a tool, no eyes to measure a radius, and certainly no lathes to cut a groove. When you hold one, or at least when the curators at the Klerksdorp Museum handle the famous specimens, the disturbing factor shifts from visual to physical. These things are heavy, dense, and feel unnervingly balanced. Roelf Marx, the former curator of the museum, famously noted that while the spheres are incredibly hard, they can be scratched with a fingernail in certain spots, yet they can't be dented by a hammer blow in others. It's a material paradox. Even more chilling was the claim that surfaced in the 80s. A sphere kept in a glass display case was allegedly rotating on its own axis, balanced so perfectly that the subtle vibrations of the Earth or the building were enough to keep it in constant, ghostly motion. Scientists from various institutes looked at this and felt that itch in the back of their brains. If these are natural, nature has a sense of geometry that borders on the supernatural. If they aren't natural, we have to rewrite every single textbook on the origin of intelligence. This isn't just about a round rock, it's about the mathematical precision of the etching. On many of the spheres, the 3 lines are spaced with a regularity that suggests a calibrated tool. In the world of OOPArts, out-of-place artifacts, the Buga sphere is the king, because it doesn't just look like a tool, it looks like a standardized tool. You don't just find one, miners have found hundreds over the decades. They come in 2 flavors. One is a solid bluish metal with white flecks, and the other is a hollow shell filled with a strange, spongy white substance. When you crack the hollow ones open, the interior looks like it was designed to hold something, or perhaps it's the degraded remains of an ancient fuel source. This is where the clickbait titles get their fuel. If you find one bolt in a 3-billion-year-old rock, it's a fluke. If you find a factory's worth of them, all following the same design language, you start wondering if the Buga isn't a sphere at all, but a piece of discarded prehistoric industrial waste. The strangeness only deepens when you realize that the rock they are found in, pyrophyllite, is actually quite soft. It's used to make tailor's chalk and electrical insulators, yet the spheres themselves are often composed of hematite or wollastonite, which are significantly harder. This creates a diamond-in-the-rough scenario where the artifact is preserved perfectly while the world around it shifts and erodes over eons. Imagine a world where the only thing left of our civilization 3 billion years from now is a single stainless steel ball bearing embedded in a mountain. That is the haunting image the Buga sphere projects. It forces us to confront the deep time paradox, where the gap between pond scum and machined metal is so vast that the human mind naturally fills it with aliens, time travelers, or a first civilization that vanished before the continents even moved into their current shapes. But the real mind-bender isn't how these spheres look. It's the terrifyingly deep timeline they were pulled from. The metallurgy of time. When you say 3 billion years, the human brain usually hits a wall. We can't really process that much time. To put it in perspective, humans have only been around for a tiny fraction of a percent of Earth's history. But the rock these spheres were found in, the pyrophyllite of the Wonderstone silver mine, dates back to the Archean Eon. Back then, the atmosphere didn't even have enough oxygen for us to breathe. The Earth was basically a hot volcanic soup with a few single-celled organisms floating around. Yet, according to the UPART theorists, someone or something was busy manufacturing metallic globes with precision-engineered grooves. This is the deep time paradox. If these spheres are truly artifacts, it means high-level technology existed before the continents had even finished forming. It suggests a first civilization that lived, thrived, and disappeared so long ago that their only remaining footprint is a handful of ball-bearing lookalikes embedded in South African shale. The disturbing part for scientists isn't just the age, it's the lack of context. Usually, when you find an artifact, you find other things nearby: trash, tools, bones, or structures. But the Buga spheres are loners. They exist in a vacuum of history. This gap is what fuels the ancient alien fire. If you're a believer, you look at that 3 billion year gap and see a perfect window for a visiting spacecraft to drop a few pieces of hardware into the mud. If you're a geologist, that gap is a nightmare because it forces you to explain how nature can mimic a machine so perfectly that it fools the human eye for decades. The spheres aren't just rocks, they are a challenge to our understanding of how time works. They represent a period of Earth's life that is so alien to us that we almost have to invent a sci-fi explanation just to make sense of them. Then there's the physical composition. The deep time aspect is complicated by the fact that these spheres are often found in pockets of the rock. They aren't just sitting on the surface, they are fully integrated into the mineral matrix. This means they were there when the rock was forming. To have a metallic or hematite sphere form inside a metamorphic rock layer requires a very specific set of temperature and pressure conditions. If these were man-made, they would have had to survive the intense heat and crushing weight of the Earth's crust, shifting over billions of years without deforming. A hollow sphere, in particular, should have been crushed flat like a soda can under a steamroller. The fact that they survived in their spherical shape is either a testament to incredible alien engineering or a hint that nature has a much more industrial side than we like to admit. This leads us to the metallurgy of the Archean era. There shouldn't be refined metals or complex mineral structures like this sitting around in neat little balls. The chemical makeup of the spheres, often a mix of hematite and magnetite, suggests they grew from the inside out, accumulating material like a pearl in an oyster. But nature usually doesn't stop at a perfect sphere with 3 parallel lines. It's messy. It's chaotic. The Buga sphere is the opposite of chaotic. It's orderly. And in a 3 billion year old world that was nothing but chaos, that order is the most disturbing result of all. But before we crown an ancient king or an alien engineer, we have to look at the lab reports and see if the claims of NASA involvement and perfect balance actually hold water. The lab reports. The lab reports are where the Buga sphere's legend goes from a weird rock story to a full-blown international conspiracy. If you spent 5 minutes on a 2005-era paranormal forum, you probably saw the claim that NASA scientists were baffled by these things. The story usually goes like this. A high-ranking space agency researcher put one of these spheres on a high-precision scale and found it was balanced to within 1/1,000,000th of an inch. The implication was clear. NASA, the people who build Mars rovers and telescopes, couldn't even replicate this level of perfection. This disturbing result was the primary engine for the clickbait that still surrounds the spheres today. It suggested that whoever made these didn't just have a lathe, they had a level of zero-gravity manufacturing that we are only just beginning to dream of. But when you actually start looking for the paper trail, the NASA connection starts to look a lot more like a game of prehistoric telephone. While NASA scientists have certainly studied strange meteorites and geological anomalies, there is no official record of a Buga sphere department, or even a peer-reviewed paper from the agency confirming these perfect balance claims. In reality, the most detailed analysis came from the California Space Institute, which looked at the spheres in the late 80s. Their conclusion: they are indeed very round, and they are indeed very old. But perfectly balanced? That was a bit of an exaggeration. Most of the spheres are slightly lopsided, or oblate, which is exactly what happens when nature tries to make a circle while being squashed by millions of tons of South African rock. The disturbing reality of the lab reports is actually found in the material science, not the NASA myths. When researchers at various universities looked at the internal structure of the spheres, they found something called radial growth. This means the spheres grew from a central point outward, like a crystal. The etching, or grooves, that look so much like a machine-cut line are actually the result of the internal layers of the sphere being harder or softer than others. As the sphere sat in the Earth for eons, the softer layers eroded faster, leaving behind the rings that we interpret as man-made grooves. It's a classic case of pareidolia, the human brain's desperate need to see patterns, faces, or tools where there is only a beautiful, random accident of chemistry. This scientific debunking doesn't actually make the spheres less interesting, it just changes the story. Instead of a 3-billion-year-old factory, we have a 3-billion-year-old chemical process that mimics human engineering so closely it fooled museum curators for decades. Rolf Marx, the man who ran the Klerksdorp Museum, often leaned into the mystery because it brought visitors to his small-town exhibit. He wasn't necessarily lying, but he was a master of the tease. He famously said, "There is nothing scientific published about the globe, but the facts are, they are found in pyrophyllite, and they are very hard." He let the public's imagination do the rest of the heavy lifting. The disturbing result wasn't that these spheres were alien. It was how easily we could be convinced that a rock was a machine part just because it had a straight line on it. But if they aren't machines, how does nature manage to manufacture hundreds of identical grooved globes without a single blueprint? The concretion. The real factory behind the Buga sphere isn't located in a laboratory or an alien mothership. It's a process called concretion. To understand how nature can manufacture hundreds of identical grooved globes without a single blueprint, you have to look at how minerals behave under extreme pressure over billions of years. Think of a concretion like a pearl. Just as an oyster grows a pearl around a tiny grain of sand, the Earth grows these spheres around a small nucleus, perhaps a speck of iron or a different mineral trapped in volcanic sediment. Over eons, minerals like hematite or wollastonite precipitate out of the surrounding groundwater and begin to crystallize in layers around that center. Because the pressure in the rock is equal from all sides, the growth naturally pushes outward in a near-perfect circle. But what about those disturbing parallel grooves? That's where the chemistry gets really clever. The rock they are found in, pyrophyllite, was originally volcanic ash. As that ash turned into stone, it formed in distinct layers, or laminae. When the sphere was growing, it hit these different layers of sediment. Some layers were slightly more acidic, some more alkaline, and some packed tighter than others. This caused the sphere to grow at different rates or with different densities at specific points along its equator. When the rock eventually shifted or weathered, those internal growth rings became exposed, looking exactly like machined grooves to the human eye. This process is essentially nature's version of 3D printing, using gravity and chemical saturation instead of a digital file. We see this elsewhere in the world, too. The Moaraki boulders in New Zealand look like giant prehistoric marbles, and the blueberries on Mars, tiny hematite spheres found by the Opportunity rover, follow the exact same geological logic. The disturbing part isn't that they are artificial, it's that nature is so consistent and disciplined that it can produce standardized shapes across different planets and eras. The Buga spheres aren't a mistake or a glitch. They are a masterpiece of Precambrian chemistry. They prove that you don't need a factory to create symmetry, you just need a few billion years and the right mix of iron and dust, But if the science is so settled, why do we still find ourselves staring at these spheres and seeing ancient astronauts? Forbidden archaeology and the patterns of the mind. Even after you lay out the chemical formulas and explain the physics of volcanic ash, there's a part of the human brain that just doesn't want to let go of the artifact theory. This is the heart of forbidden archaeology. We have this deep-seated, almost primal urge to find evidence that we aren't the first smart things to walk this planet. When we look at a Buga sphere, we aren't just seeing a clump of hematite, we are looking for a mirror. We want to see a reflection of our own industrial cleverness in the deep, dark layers of the Earth's crust. This isn't just a lack of scientific literacy, it's a psychological phenomenon called apophenia, the tendency to perceive meaningful connections between unrelated things. In the world of OOPArts, the Buga sphere is the ultimate Rorschach test. To a geologist, the grooves are a sign of sedimentary layering. To a conspiracy theorist, those same grooves are evidence of a 3 billion-year-old planetary defense system or a discarded piece of alien hardware. This disturbing disconnect exists because our brains are hardwired for pattern recognition. For thousands of years, recognizing a sharp edge on a stone meant finding a tool or a weapon. Our survival depended on seeing manufactured shapes in nature. Now, that same survival instinct misfires when we look at a round rock from a South African mine. We see a bearing because we know what bearings look like, even if the bearing in question was formed 2.8 billion years before the first wheel was ever carved. This is why the Buga sphere remains a staple of late-night internet deep dives. It challenges the linear progress narrative, the idea that humans started as apes and gradually got smarter until we reached the iPhone. If the Buga sphere were real, that entire timeline would be a lie. It would mean that intelligence isn't a recent peak, but a recurring cycle. That's a terrifying and thrilling thought. It's the same reason people are obsessed with the Antikythera mechanism or the Baghdad battery. We love the idea of forbidden knowledge because it suggests the world is much weirder and more crowded than the textbooks say. The spheres aren't just rocks, they are the physical manifestation of our desire to be part of a much larger, older, and more mysterious story. Ultimately, the Buga sphere represents the ghost in the machine of archaeology. It's the thing that shouldn't be there, but is. Whether it's a miracle of nature or a relic of a lost world, it forces us to stand at the edge of a 3 billion-year-old cliff and realize how little of the Earth's biography we've actually read. We see a machine because we are a machine-making species. But perhaps the most disturbing truth is that nature was manufacturing perfect, balanced, and grooved spheres long before we even had the imagination to dream of them. So, after all the lab tests, the NASA myths, and the psychological deep dives, what is the final verdict on these tiny, metallic enigmas? The echo in the stone, the Buga sphere remains the ultimate Rorschach test for humanity. While science has demystified the how, proving they are the result of 3 billion-year-old mineral growth, the why of our obsession remains. We are a species of builders, so when we see a grooved, balanced sphere, we desperately want it to be a tool. We want to believe we aren't the first intelligence to leave a mark on this planet. The reality is perhaps more humbling. Nature doesn't need a factory to create symmetry. These spheres are silent witnesses to the Earth's infancy, surviving the shift of continents and the rise of life itself. They aren't discarded alien tech, but they aren't just rocks either. They are a masterpiece of deep time, a reminder that the planet was manufacturing perfection long before we arrived to claim it for ourselves. Stay tuned for more deep dives into history's strangest anomalies. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a mystery.